Wayne, thanks for joining me again, and maybe just to start off, give me your general thoughts on that game against the U.S. Obviously, a lot of people in this country disappointed.
Yeah, well, I mean, they did so many things well. I thought they dominated long stretches of that game. They put 45 shots on the U.S. goal, which, most nights against most teams and most goalies would get it done, but it didn't get it done here. I think the critical issue was getting stung early by U.S. goals. The Americans scoring 41 seconds into the game, sort of taking the crowd out of it a little bit, and Canada never being able to get a lead the entire game. They always seemed to be playing catch up. They tied it 1-1 and then fell behind quickly 2-1, tied it 2-2, and then behind 3-2, and then gave up that fourth goal, and ended up again clawing back to within one before giving up the empty net goal. But they just didn't convert enough of their chances.
You talk about on road games trying to take the home crowd out of it early, and I guess it looks like the U.S. was able to do that. I mean, we don't really get a realistic sense, but it seems like the crowd was almost nervous all night or something.
Well, I think so, and if this could have gone much differently if a puck was off of a stick or a skate at the other end instead of off Crosby's stick in the first minute to fool Martin Brodeur. They didn't get a lot of those breaks where they could have got a lead, relaxed, let the crowd relax and enjoy it. It was, if you were writing that script for the United States, a young team on a stage that they've never been on before, in front of a crowd they've never really kind of experienced before at the international level, outside of a World Junior event. That's how you would have scripted it. You would have got some early goals on Brodeur. You would have rattled him a little bit, and you would have made Canada play catch up all night. So it played out very well for them, and then as a reward, they end up first overall in the preliminary round, which puts them in great shape because they not only advance automatically to the quarterfinals, but get a weaker opponent in the quarters. Whereas a scenario I've just kind of penciled out here, we're just sitting down with some other people going through it, but it's Canada now has to beat Germany and then beat Russia. And then if they can do that, it looks like they would probably match up with Sweden in the semifinal. Right. And then, whoever's left, they would meet in the final. Could be the United States or it could be Finland, but that's where it lies. So it's tough road. They've basically got 4 Game 7s coming up in a row: Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and that's if they win them all to keep advancing.
Now, when you look at the score sheet and you look at the chances and you look at the shots, it certainly looked like Canada should have won that game. And I was listening to some of the call-in shows afterwards, and boy, people were really all over Martin Brodeur. What did you think of his game? And if you're Mike Babcock, do you go back with Luongo against Germany?
Well, we're going to find out here shortly, but I think they're probably going to go to Luongo. And I thought Brodeur was just a little bit shaky. I mean, you can't really fault him on many of the goals. Maybe the one Rafalski shot that kind of slid by him and just inside the post as he was sliding to try to make the save. But it's the things he was doing around his crease that didn't exude confidence, and I think probably didn't give the bench a lot of confidence when he's whacking at pucks in midair and launching himself at shots into crease. He just didn't look like a goalie who was in complete control. Very much unlike Ryan Miller at the other end, who just seemed to be rock solid, always in position. Didn't really have to make a spectacular save, but he was there and looked formidable on most of those Canadian attacks.
And that's the odd thing about Brodeur, isn't it? Because you would have thought without the trapezoid that would be a huge advantage for Canada, and it was really a weakness last night.
I know, and we were just kicking it around here a little bit, but you wonder if it didn't mess up his mind somewhat, because he's played with that trapezoid now for some time in the NHL, and all of a sudden he has this new freedom, and he talked about it last week in the mix zone. He said, there's so much hype about the no trapezoid. It's almost like I'm expected to put on a show out there or something. Because there's just been so much hype about it. Like, what am I going to do, and how am I going to change the way I play? And I honestly think it might have messed him up a little bit. That he was thinking, I've got more freedom now, I can move, and I guess I should wander a bit more. And it just seemed like, I said to the colleague sitting beside me last night, I said, every time Martin Brodeur touches the puck, something bad seems to happen. And if they didn't score, as they did on the one Rafalski play, then they threatened to score. And when do you usually say that about Brodeur? Normally he's the third defenseman back there. When he's got the puck, he's maybe whipping it up to center ice to start an attack, or he's clearing the zone. But this was one of those games where he looked like one of the Ottawa Senators goalies who usually like to criticize for how they handle the puck, and we just say stay in the crease, because every time you do it, it causes problems. Well, who would have thought we'd say that about Martin Brodeur, but that seemed to be the case last night.
Or be talking about a bad game from him in a pressure situation, because this is a guy who is sort of the money big game goaltender in the NHL.
Well, and I think, James, this is where it gets tricky now, because it's fine to go to Luongo against the weak German team. They're the 11th out of 12 teams here. They probably won't mount much of an attack. So now you're looking at Luongo, and you're evaluating his game based on an 8-0 defeat of Norway when he was hardly challenged, and supposedly let's assume a pretty easy victory over Germany. Now you have to decide: do you go with the battle-tested guy in Brodeur, the multiple Stanley Cup champion, the Olympic gold medalist? Do you go to him, even though he's had a bit of a tough go here, or do you trust Luongo? He's never really been in a big game. He's never won a Stanley Cup. He's never been an Olympic goalie. He's never been really the number one guy at an Olympic tournament. Do you trust him based on a couple of games against weak opponents? It's going to be a very, very, very difficult decision. And that's one that Steve Yzerman and the coaching staff will soon be facing.
Do you think there's any argument to be made that it is Luongo's home rink, and he knows what it's like to be there, and he's at home, and he'll hear the Lou chant and maybe run with it?
I don't know. I hear that. I hear Vancouver writers say things like that in the press box, but this is a very different stage. This is the Olympic Games. There's enormous pressure. Even if you say that this is Luongo's home turf and he can just feel like it's another Vancouver Canucks game, for one thing it isn't. But even if it were, you'd have to extrapolate this scenario into like Game 7 of a Stanley Cup final, because that's what we're into now. We're into sudden death. We're into a big game. We're talking about situations where he really hasn't been, except as an early round playoff type goalie. But into the final and being the guy, and facing the likes of Russia and Sweden potentially over the next few nights. Yeah, that's a pretty interesting situation.
Mm-hmm. There's obviously been a lot of second guessing already, which is maybe a little surprising, but maybe not, that just about the makeup of the team, because it's a team that is almost, it's kind of nightmares of past years where they had a ton of chances and couldn't find the back of the net, getting 3 goals against the Swiss and 3 against the Americans. And, I heard people talking about, why isn't Mike Green on here? I mean, just, you've seen every game and you get a different perspective because you see the whole ice surface all the time. But what do you think of the team game so far? Because the chances are there, the goals aren't.
I think it's lacking a little bit, James, and I think it's going to be so easy to second guess personnel. You can look at a Mike Green on a defense when you see what Rafalski did for the United States.
Right.
An older veteran guy, but a guy that can bring something to the power play. So you can look at how well his Niedermayer's been pretty good, but Chris Pronger hasn't been very good. He's looked kind of big and slow, and he was a detriment in 2006, and I thought he was almost symbolic of Canada's disastrous Olympics in 06. So you can look at that, and then you're going to be looking at guys like Stamkos and Martin St. Louis when you start to look at forwards, and it won't be hard to pick 2 or 3 or 4 forwards that were really laggards over here. And you can look at whether it's a kind of a role player like a Brendan Morrow or Mike Richards, they just haven't really done very much. And now you're going to think about Stamkos, who was ripping it up over the last few weeks in the NHL.